Hi everyone, welcome to today's lesson. We're carrying on with this long project where we are copying a masterpiece. In this case it's a Waterhouse painting from the 19th century. And last week we finished off blocking in most of the darker values, which in this case a lot of the paintings actually kind of primarily lighter values. So we'll be doing a bit more today than we did last week, but again you can see the looseness of the brushwork even at this scale, so we're still going to be keeping things pretty loose, and we'll be going in and tightening them up quite a lot in subsequent weeks. So I think we'll have about 3 weeks after this to get to grips with the finishing of it. Primarily I'm going to be, if possible, I'm going to block in the background colours, but I'm going to be mainly focusing on the figure. So it'll be more a case of getting those tones to a reasonable level. This stage can be, well, it's typically referred to as dead colouring. So it can look a little bit dead at this stage because you're just blocking tones over. With this kind of layered painting, a lot of the vibrancy comes through detail and glazing subsequently. So mainly we're just trying to structure our tones, figure out how light we want to go in the lightest section. So I think probably the lightest point in the painting will be the centre of head chest, and then kind of the top of the arm as well to a certain extent. I'm going to be working with mostly quite big brushes, so I've got a couple of, like one bristle and one softer head brush that are both quite wide, similar width, and then one smaller brush just for adding details. And my palette is similar to last week, I think. So I've got titanium white, ivory black, burnt umber, raw umber, alizarin crimson, Prussian blue if I need it, probably when we're doing some of the landscape or background colours where we need some greens, we'll mix some of that in. And then what else do we have? Cadmium red, cadmium yellow, and yellow ochre. So those are primarily what we'll be using in the figure. So let's get started. We'll maybe work, I usually like to try to work sort of from the top left down, just because that way you avoid resting your hand over sections that have already been painted. So we'll mix up a attempt at a skin tone. So I think the skin tone will roughly be white with a little bit of cad yellow and cad red mixed in, is what I'll go for. Possibly toned down a bit with some burnt umber as well, just to allow for the later stages to have a bit more intensity over this initial lay-in. My medium is a mixture of mostly mineral spirits, a little bit of oil. So as I lay that on, it looks a little bit too grey, so I'm just going to add a bit more red and yellow to it, lift the chroma. So when I say it's grey, I mean it's low chroma, it doesn't feel saturated enough, that colour. That's better. Yeah, that's not too bad as an initial flesh tone. Flesh tones generally kind of like, they're basically brownish, so if they're lighter they'll be kind of like a yellowy reddish brown colour essentially, and then as they get darker they kind of just have the same constituent parts but the value changes. So as I say, I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail. I'm starting with the lighter tones. So they run I need to lay it on reasonably thickly, just to make sure that it doesn't end up too much of a scumble, which is when you do kind of a thin layer a lighter colour over a darker colour, but we will be working over the top of this anyway, so we're just kind of trying to get approximately the right colour. Going for a slightly pinker colour, might need to go a little bit pinker again. A bit lighter up there. So I'm now starting to add halftones working towards the shadows from those lighter sections. And it's just a case of patching over the campitura. I'm not going into any detail with the face, I'm just trying to roughly block in these tones. We'll have plenty of time to develop the details in future lessons. For the time being, we're just looking at the general relationship of different colours in the figure. So now that we move into these halftones, we're starting to get some greys, kind of almost greenish tones. Greenish sort of blues, which is one of the tricky aspects of Waterhouse's painting. And I'm just mixing a little bit of ivory black into my skin tones to try to achieve that. It's quite a subtle effect, so I don't want to do it too much. As I say, it's something that we can develop in future sessions, so it's not by any means going to look perfect at this stage, but you shouldn't expect it to, so don't get disheartened if you're working at something like this and you don't feel it quite looks like the original immediately. Takes time to develop towards that. To just block it in as best you can, which is what I'm doing here. I'm not going to go in much more detail than that for this face. We'll probably spend almost an entire session quite soon working on it, so just want to make sure it roughly works well with all the other tones, which I think it does at the moment. Tend to get some slightly more pinkish hues moving down towards elbows and cheeks. You'll notice that the cheeks and elbows are quite pinkish. Some of these colours I'm just adjusting on the canvas, rather than mixing new colours. Once you start to get some paint on there, you don't necessarily need to mix brand new colours to make adjustments. You can work by adjusting what you have there already. So it's probably not too bad for the flesh, I think, or at least that portion of the flesh. We won't add too much more than that. I might do just a few using a smaller brush. I'll just put in a few little notes for little adjustments for some of the shapes. So we've got the bottom of that nose, this brow, jutting up into there. It's not too bad. So what I'll work on now, we want to try to get this this dress roughed in as well. So I'm going to mix up a larger tone for the dress. It's a bit more straightforward. Flesh tones tend to have a lot of different jumps. I'm going to be using white and alizarin crimson for this dress. So we can just start patching on really. Go a little bit darker maybe. Yeah, I think for now I'm just going to stick with, as it's such a simple mixture, the alizarin crimson, even if it means we end up with a slightly different pinkish tone than the original. With those sorts of things you have a bit more freedom to too bad as a block in. So drop down here as well. Just kind of working to the shapes that we defined with our shadows last week. Primarily. Then as we get really low down, there's a bit of yellow mixed in. Just because there's, I think, some reflections coming up. Might mix a little bit of these yellower tones up here just to balance out the kind of coolness of the pink that we had blocked in. But primarily these heavier yellows or brighter yellows are going to exist just down here. So, and I've got some strong yellows coming through in these shadows and lying over a lot of these portions of the drapery. So I've gone a bit looser again, don't have to be quite so tight working on these sections. Some of it's quite brown, similar to what we've already got, so I don't actually need to make too much of a change to that stuff. And where are we now? Yeah, I might mix, so I'm going to mix a kind of more intense bright yellow, which will be the shinier portions of this gold just here. Start to build a suggestion of that. So the gold kind of has a sheen where it wraps around this dress. So that's starting to read a bit better now, just through there as well. I'm just going to build a suggestion of this. I'm not going to actually finish it off today. We'll probably spend a single session working on the drapery. I'm going to start working a bit more kind of rapidly around now, because we're kind of coming to the close of this session. Obviously when you're working on your own piece, you don't have to work quite this rapidly. I like to try to keep them quite short, and it also makes it more achievable when you're working on your own time to get these sorts of results, which is what we're after. So we've got kind of yellowish colours there, so there's a few places, there's darker yellows there, kind of reflected yellows. Down here, and sort of scrubbier. And we can start blocking in these greys for the rock, which will probably just be, I think, just white mixed with black will pretty much do it. It's a useful colour combo to have white and black. I'll block those in. So not going for any detail, we just want to establish what colour roughly will be in this section of the painting. Oh, actually I'll drop down a bit there because I've lost us. What colour will sort of subsequently be in this same position. Got some more grey rocks here. I think, as I said last week, you want to generally kind of try to block in colours, places that they, like if you've mixed up a colour, you want to try to place it while you have it on your brush. So I'm kind of looking around for all these greys that look roughly the same as this grey that I've already got mixed up, and then washing it on. Because you don't want to have to be mixing up one colour, placing it, and mixing up a different colour, then finding that the same colour can be placed in a similar position again. So there's also this kind of grey actually features in some of the drapery as it kind of wraps up, twists around out of the figure, so we'll start to rub that over as well. And pretty similar grey in these trees, so you can pretty much do them in a single stroke. It's a little bit darker. This one in behind, so more in shadow, which then gives me another tone for that one. Got some more just there. Can do a little suggestion of it in this tree, but then it starts to get darker up the top of the tree, which I can mix some black, burnt umber together to get. That's not too bad. And it starts to wrap over there. When it goes higher and more into the background, it actually goes more brown, more burnt umbery. Almost actually going to a shadow. Could have almost been a shadow, that one. Then looking at the backdrop, we've got some strong kind of orangey yellow trees kind of back here. A little bit darker than that actually. That's a little bit better. And dropping back down, we've got some kind of lighter brownier colours in there, kind of almost yellowish. Just behind there. Just shift my camera around a bit. So not too bad there. I'm going to just quickly mix up an almost pure white and blue mixture. Which is for the light of the sky showing through little points along here. And this is probably actually the brightest point in the image. So this is where our pure white resides. It's usually somewhere. In this case it's the sky behind her. Which works quite well because it makes a lot of the other tones feel as though they are kind of in shade, which suits the woodland setting. So it's definitely well designed from that point of view, as you would expect. Something like that will probably do it. Again, this is something we'll work back over later on, but it's good to get our lightest tone in. And where are we up to now? So using that blue actually, so trying to be efficient with my mixing, I'm going to get some OCAD yellow, mix that with our blue, and then that will give us this bank colour behind her arm. Might just tone it down slightly, it's maybe a little bit too much of a buzzy colour, so I'm going to add a little bit of yellow ochre into that. Maybe put some touches over there as well. possibly a little bit too bright, that, so I'm going to try to rein it back in a bit with some burnt umber. I feel like it stands out a little bit too much against the arm relative to the original. It's a bit better. That separation works better. So I can use some of this green down below as well. If I just draw my camera, we're nearly getting there with this. So I'm going to stop quite soon. A bit of yellow with my Prussian blue again. That's the mixture we're using for our greens. So we can use that to get these bits of grass. Do a slight kind of scrub over this bank side here. There's a little bit over there, little touches here and there. And then behind those greens we've got some kind of more reddish browns, really standard reddish browns, which is pretty similar to actually what we've got as the canvas, so we won't spend too long on that. Got about 5 more minutes or so of work. So I'm just going to try to get this last little section of the background underneath where she's sitting roughed in. So get some of this water next to the reflection, like a dirtier kind of green brown. So a few little bits of red in there as well. To that foot. Where her foot actually is in the water goes a kind of more bluish colour, the lighter portion of it, and as it kind of transitions into the surrounding tones as well. So finally, we're going to pop in this foot, so we can use most of those colours that we'd already been working with. Up top, the rest of the figure. That'll be a little bit darker just because it's not quite such a focal point. It's gone a little bit muddy with my colours, so I'm trying to get a slightly zingier flesh tone for this foot. That's a bit better, but we're going to rework it soon anyway, so I'll just roughly block it in like that. It should be fine. And that's pretty much it, I think, for the block in. So from next week onwards, we'll be able to go in and start kind of working over the top of this, picking individual areas and building up detail primarily. That's what we'll be focusing on. Just put some slightly lighter blues. The last thing I need to do. Look at it, try to get rid of too much of this, or quite a bit of this brown that we've already got in there. Oh, that's not too bad. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So a little bit of a pan up and down. Got pretty much everything blocked in. You can see, if I zoom in, I don't know if it will autofocus. It's all pretty loose. So I'm not worried about going into tons of detail. I'm pretty happy with the drawing that I originally got in. Everything just blocked in, so we can basically build form over that. But yeah, it's pretty happy with that. Good start. And we'll leave it at that for today. So next week we'll be picking a particular area, probably maybe developing the face a bit and kind of finishing that to a rendered point, which will give us something to work from subsequently. But yeah, that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and as always you can follow the link through to OCAD's page to sign up for tuition from myself and other tutors. And you can have a look through our old videos on my older videos on YouTube just to try out a bunch of different exercises. And yeah, that's it. I'll see you guys soon.